Welcome to Rediscovering Childhood. Today's guest is someone reshaping how we think about the very earliest years of childhood. Not just how much screen time kids have, but what they are actually absorbing and how it affects their development. Will Maurer, also known as the father of children's media reform, is the executive director of the Children's Media Research and Reform Lab, a global initiative dedicated to reimagining children's media based on science, human connection, and real development needs rather than entertaining strategy and attention capture. Will spent decades inside the entertainment industry before becoming a father at the start of the pandemic, living with his son for the first 18 months with almost no external noise, changed everything for him. It revealed how babies learn through human interaction, rhythm, responsiveness, and connection, and how easily overstimulation can derail that process. That experience propelled him into a mission to reform a system with massive influence and almost no accountability, challenging outdated screen time advice, if there is any, and exposing the hidden ingredients in children's media that can be more harmful than screen time itself. In this episode, we're going to unpack why asking how much screen time, how much is too much, misses the point, how parents can start trusting their instincts again, what children lose when stimulation comes from algorithms instead of people, and what healthy media engagement could look like if we rebuilt it from developmental science forward. So, Will, very welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate being here.
It's amazing. I think you have a very powerful message to share with the world. So I'm very grateful for all the work and people like you with passion to really help our future generations, to help us as parents make better choices for the future generations, to give them more possibilities really for their life. So I'd like to start from the end. Why should anybody listen to this episode? What will they get out of it, and how is this going to impact the development of their children and their future?
Oh, that's a great question, a great way to frame it. First I want to say this is a judgment-free, shame-free. I'm a parent. I felt all of those emotions as a parent, getting guidance, advice. Everybody's got opinions. Why? I spent 20 years in the entertainment industry, intimately aware of a lot of the content that gets produced for children's entertainment. And I was shocked when I had my son and started to do research on how programming is developed, marketed, and distributed. I had no clue, and that really shook me up. I felt complicit in that, but I refused to be complacent, so I wanted to do something about it. So what I did about it is what we'll talk about, and now going on 6 years of research that I've undertaken, primarily in the early years, the 0 to 2 age group, which are developmentally the most important in a human's life.
What has been the most shocking finding you have discovered with your research so far?
Well, that it's not a parent problem. It's not a studio created problem. It's a systemic issue that spans trusted organizations, trusted platforms, public media, producers, brands, researchers in the field. This is so far reaching, the issues and the information, that it seemed at first impossible to correct or fix or reform. But, I figured the best way to start is by talking about the issues. In talking about them, there seems like a lot of blame and judgment. What I found is a lot of people like myself who come from the industry are not completely aware of all the aspects. And I'm not even aware of all the aspects myself, but I'm aware of elements and certain aspects that shouldn't be ignored or avoided or looked over or discarded. So that's what I talk about, is that conversation. How can we have a conversation about this? How can we bring the researchers into the room, the organizations that support parents, children into the room, mental health experts, pediatricians, have that and parents who have lived experience, who know their kids better than anyone. How can we have these conversations in a way that's non-judgmental or polarizing, and more getting to a certain mission, accomplishing a certain mission?
Let's see. Say I have I'm very busy. I'm exhausted. I'm overwhelmed as a parent. I have a 1-year-old and I put the telly on all day because I just need to do my thing, which I end up scrolling on Instagram for hours and hours and hours. What is going on here? And then I feel guilty about it. And I'm in that cycle loop. And because I feel guilty, I'm in a bad place. And then I can't interact with my children. So, what is going on here? And what should I be aware of when that happens in relation to what my child is watching, for example?
Content, no matter where that content is, Instagram, YouTube, broadcast, public media, is increasingly becoming engineered for attention. It's creating those addictive patterns, those addictive loops, those the engagement techniques. Once you see, I say, once you see them, you can't unsee them, and it becomes clear. And I think that's where the education needs to start: is identifying the tactics used to capture engagement. And when we talk about adults versus young children, infants, toddlers, their brains are not able to process certain techniques, certain production techniques, certain visuals, even audio, the same way that older kids or adults can. And this is all known. There's research groups working for content creators and studios who are studying this and understand engagement. I think over here in the US, Mark Zuckerberg was on trial for
I
this.
saw that today. Yeah.
Yeah, that just happened yesterday. So, you know, luckily, the awareness about these techniques and how content is being designed is coming to the light, is being talked about. What now we just need to get all the pieces, because right now it's one villain, right? One villain here, one villain there. But there's a lot of other players that are complicit in this, and we need to kind of expose that. The question you asked is my story. My son was born at the start of the pandemic. He had colic for the first year. Our largest gap of sleep was 3 hours. And then, when you wake up, it's not a gentle wake up. It's a scream. It's a cry. It's distress. So we were constantly in fight or flight. And around 6 months, we were like, when does TV start? My career was inspired by the cartoons that I grew up watching. I was always in front of a TV. Back then it was, if you sit too close, you're going to go blind. Now it's, if you watch too long, you'll end up with autism. There's all these, unfounded claims being made. But the truth is, what's happening in the content is something we need to talk about. And that is, some of these techniques are the rapid sequencing, where there's not a connection in the story. Are stories age appropriate? Cluttered backgrounds, a lot of competing points of interest, big, bright, bold colors, visual effects, sound effects that just ping and pop. And, you know, even as an adult, it's hard to focus on what are we supposed to learn here, and that's really what's happened. The scripts, the underlying idea of the show is, oh, this is great because they're learning how to develop language. They're learning how to develop empathy. Great points. But if that's happening behind a lot of chaos on the screen, which is typically what happens because those are the engagement techniques, then those lessons that were intended in the script aren't being realized by the individual watching.
So is that one of the things that we could look at when we're choosing? Is there appropriate content for under 2-year-olds?
Yes. I mean, there's, we approach it right now as we continue to do more evidence-based research as a harm reduction, right? I agree with certain guidelines that if we could keep children off screens, not just till 2, as long as possible, that's the best for their development. They learn in environments with other human connection, right? And not to say that TV is all bad, in that there is content that can be developmentally enriching, and that's what we've been working on developing for the younger years. But we have to strip away all of the engagement tactics, all of the production techniques. And what I found for my son was a mechanic on YouTube who literally set his camera down, found old rusty cars and started to sandblast them, Bondo them, repaint them. Very therapeutic. There was no audio, just the visual. And it was calming, soothing for our son. It allowed us to get a mental health break, a minute to do what we needed to do. And our son never wanted to watch more than, 20 minutes, 30 minutes of that. So we were lucky in that regard. He's 5 now, and he'd rather be outside playing than watching screen. Now we're the ones who are saying, "Hey, let's watch a movie. You know, it's Christmas. Let's watch a." He's like, "Nah, I don't want to do that." So our own personal experience has been by choosing our content carefully, and which is extremely hard to do because the marketing, not just the content, but the marketing. This is baby safe. Your baby's going to learn. You know, before it was Baby Einstein, and I think they were sued for their deceptive claims. Now it's Miss Rachel and Blippy, and here's the educational TV for babies, and now there's hundreds of people doing similar things. But and some of those are great. I think Miss Rachel has great messages, but it literally goes from one to another within a few seconds. A young child can't comprehend that
Yeah.
level of learning. It's not sustainable. It's not coming through. So yes, to answer your question in a roundabout way, there are great programs for children under 2. Really, we focus on the less stimulating because the real learning comes from the parent or the caregiver and the child sitting down and experiencing together, repeating what's happening, having that connection, that bond. We know parents use this screen sometimes as a digital babysitter. So in those circumstances, it's how can we create the least stimulating content as possible? I would say pro-social play-based activities are so important. If we could show a child of that age group, whether it's 6 months, 9 months, a year, 18 months, seeing on the screen something they would actually be doing, there's a great benefit because we know children mirror what they see, even in the early years. So let's give them something to model good behavior without all the overstimulation on the production techniques.
Yeah, that makes me think of screens as a window into the world and how important it is for children to experience lots of different things. And that's what they do when they play. They experience being a doctor, being a teacher, and then if they have a neighbor, maybe that's a musician, they experience lots of things. So when they're choosing careers or what makes them happy or what they want to do with their life, the more experiences they have, the more options they know because they'll choose something based on what they know is possible. So I think using screen, as you said, as a window to see what's possible and to see real live, real paced activities and things, and just it really nearly, as you said, it calms you down because you're just there with it. It nearly makes you come back to the present and just I'm here now and I'm observing these and this is, and then it really enhances their curiosity as well because you're wondering, oh, they're opening this tire. I remember my cousin, his favorite activity was opening any devices he would find in the house, any phones, computers. Can I open it? See what's inside. So even watching things like that to a certain point, and then you go off and do your thing, that combination between play and screen could be quite beneficial from that perspective.
Absolutely. We call it a bridge and a learning bridge, not only for the child, but for the parent.
Right.
Parents have a hard time knowing how to play with their children. So giving them opportunities to mirror behaviors that have been created by experts in the field of early childhood development is important. They start to understand how a child develops. They start to see the curiosity, and they can help bridge that from a screen-based passive experience to a play-based in-home or at a center or um, uh, a school-based environment. There's opportunities there, and that's what we really miss in this is the opportunities to bring parents and children together. Co-viewing is a word, or joint media, shared screen time are words that get thrown around a lot, but there's not a lot of attention put behind designing for that, right? So if you just say do it, you should be watching with your kid. But if you've ever watched some of these kid shows with your kid, there's not enough room to even watch with them. There's so much stuff happening. There's never a break in audio. There's never a break in action. How can you have a conversation
Yeah.
during that? It's not designed for that. What it's designed for is to immediately hook, engage, and capture the child's attention. And then instead of that curiosity of going from a screen to an activity. Our son loved cars, and a lot of the content we showed him early on were trash trucks just doing their thing, slowly moving, picking up. He loved trash trucks. So his play was what he was seeing on the screen. Even with the example I said with the mechanic, he would pretend to fix cars and trucks. And that was a lot of to do with what he saw on the screen. With the overstimulating content, what ends up happening is not a transfer from the screen to the play-based environment. It's a it's a bridge of I need more. I want more. If you ever try to turn it off and find it, good luck trying to find a spot to turn it off because now they just autoplay and continue to create compilations that are hours long. There's never a good spot to turn it off without a kid saying, you know, I wasn't done or,
Yeah.
lashing out. So these are all by design, So when we look at
And
that,
what
when we
is
look
really
at
going on in their brain when that happens? When you turn off the TV and they go a little bit crazy. What they're watching doing to their brains?
yeah, well, what the research shows is that when a young child is exposed to that level of stimulation, it triggers dopamine imbalances in the brain that are similar to drug addiction. Those dopamine imbalances have the longing, the craving, that addictive behaviors. And what's happening with the programming is those techniques, those overstimulating techniques, precondition the mind to expect high levels of stimulation. Those are the techniques that keep a child hooked and longing for more. The truth is, it's impossible for them to find that level of stimulation anywhere else. If you watch some of these shows, it's just unreplicatable to have those same experiences in the real life. I equate it to, walking into like a Las Vegas casino. It's the bells ringing, everybody's either angry or happy or excited, and there's so much stimulation happening that you get kind of caught up in that and you want more. It feels impossible to kind of step away from it until you're depleted, drained, have no money left, or ready for bed.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to think is that it is our responsibility as parents to limit that and choose. But also, as you said, not just to limit their time, but to choose what they're watching. So
Yes.
first of all, what impact does these have in the long term? If they're watching these on a consistently, what impact is that going to have in their life, in their skills, in their development?
Yeah, there's a lot of different it affects all of the core developmental domains, screen time, and it depends on the type of content, how long you're sitting there watching. But a lot of the overstimulating production techniques show themselves in symptoms of withdrawal. When a child doesn't have TV or you say no TV, you start to see them become irritable and they want it. They need their TV and they need it right now. And then it becomes negotiating and bargaining for, okay, just a little bit. But then that little bit becomes longer and longer and longer. And it becomes, once you get in it, it's harder to stop it than to just stop it from the beginning, right? Because then they're getting their dopamine hits and they're continuing to crave that. There's studies that show a decline in the executive function, again, depending on the type of content. Some content could be beneficial and developmentally enriching. Most of it is harmful and children aren't able to process facts the same way, process reality the same way because they're exposed to content that completely dismorphs what reality is. And now parents have a new thing for future parents with all this AI slop that's being generated. It's just constant AI that looks almost exactly like your favorite shows. It could look educational. It could look like it's coming from trusted sources. But what ends up happening is this content is just continuously being generated by AI with very little human oversight, if any. It just gets directly uploaded to
Is that
YouTube.
more like YouTube kind of content?
Yeah, YouTube specifically, where anyone can just upload anything. But what YouTube rewards is engagement, right? So it's all a fight for engagement. How can we, if we've got one child, how do we get that child to watch what we're creating as opposed to something that uh, someone with a great background of research and neuroscience where they understand how to capture attention and how to engineer content to really capture that attention. What do you do if you're in that field and your revenue, your livelihood depends on competing? Right now, the competition has gone so low and there's content always available and no regulations on marketing, what you can say, how you present this to parents. It's a really difficult time for parents. That's why the parents aren't to blame in this. We need to start putting the blame and framing the conversations around why this is happening, who's enabling it, why is this allowed to happen? And what ends up happening is when you reframe that conversation and you talk to the um, studios or researchers behind some of these shows or the development experts, they then say, well, the parent should not be playing this. This was never intended for a 6-month-old. We never said this is okay for a 6-month-old or this or that. So parents are in the middle like, what do I do? I just need, where do I turn to for something trusted? And that's getting harder and harder to find, especially for the early years.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to give an example of everything you've said, I was at a restaurant a few weeks ago and there was a family, about 6 kids, all quite much older. There was a 1 or 2 year old, and she was watching YouTube shorts. And I could see her just because I was sitting behind. I had to leave. I was like, I can't watch this. She was just scrolling, and the mom had to use the phones to check something on Google Maps or something. So she took the phone, checked something, and the child started screaming crazy. So the dad gave her his phone, as in, stop. And then the child got his lap, as in, stop screaming, stop screaming, stop screaming, just because they took the phone away. So, that's like, what are we doing?
Yeah. And then that's how that gets dealt with, right? It's either here's more of the same or it's yelling at the child who's dysregulated,
And then it's
you know,
inconvenient for us.
right. And then we feel as parents, we feel bad, we feel embarrassed, we feel for all the things, a child not being able to be regulated or a- also our actions in doing that. I see it everywhere now and it's difficult because this content nowadays is being engineered to create that addictive behavior. And I get a lot of flack for saying addiction or saying, harmful, bad ingredients in
But the
media.
brain, the studies show the brain, the pictures of the brain, how it did, as exactly like you said, it's it triggers the same parts of the brain as a drug addiction.
Right. It does, absolutely, and the symptoms are the same, the withdrawal, the need for more, the dysregulation, the constant thinking about it. It's plain. You don't have to be an expert to see this, right? That's why I say parents are the best judge of their particular child because all children are different. They're all unique. They all are developmentally different. A parent who's attuned, caregivers who are attuned need to take that into account. That's why there's not a one answer. We know that less stimulation on the screen is better, is is best. What ends up happening when you say less stimulation, it's like, oh, look at this. It's just a child or an animal, and there's just things happening in the background, but the object, the character is so calm and almost meditative and sleeping, but all the chaos in the background, that's where the kids' eyes are going. When you film this and you do eye tracking and you actually do the research, they're the deceptive framing of these shows is what parents feel good about and are like, "Oh, I'm making a better choice for my child." But the developers of this content know how to take a parent's okay, parents want more or less stimulating content, so we'll give them something that appears on the surface less stimulating, but we know that a child, their eyes will track this. They won't be able to comprehend what happens, which then triggers a different part of the brain where they're unable to figure it out. And now they're just hooked. Their brain is trying to catch up and process. So actions are happening and they're always trying to catch up to that. And that's a different loop that ends up happening.
Quite genius, isn't it?
It's It's
Sadly.
very genius, and it's
Yeah.
scary that it's in those hands, and there's no one on the other side really saying putting laws in place, putting regulations in place, putting guidelines out there, enforcing this. It's being enabled and not enforced, and then the parents are the ones who are being blamed, which is convenient because it's like, we're not, "Hey, we're not the ones who put your kid in front of this," but
Yeah.
so that loop is constant. It's been happening for decades. It's been happening for multiple generations, different formats. But now what we're seeing, especially with AI and that AI generated content, is even the most trusted brands that parents used to turn to, in order for them to keep up and to continue to have a brand, a career, a livelihood, they are having to resort to some of these tactics in order to get back some of that engagement from their viewers.
Yeah, there's a really popular video now going viral on Instagram and social media of the top of the screen. You can see Cinderella, which is happening really slow, and it's the magic one, and she turns around. And then at the bottom one, there's a brand new cartoon movie, and it's all like flashy everywhere, and like so much happens in like in the space of 5 seconds in the bottom screen, just while Cinderella puts on a shoe.
Right, right.
You can see the difference how, how can we expect our children to be regulated and focused when this is what they're watching all day?
Yeah, that's their exposure, right? It's quick, fast,
Mm.
not connected, disjointed. Yes, we do a lot of visual and sound comparative analysis, where we will look at multiple screens and windows and start to see patterns. When you see them all laid out, you start to see the development patterns that producers and studios are creating in order to capture the engagement. And those are the things I say, when once you see them and once you understand them in that context, which you just shared, that's where it's hard to unsee them. And that's where the education happens with parents. And they're like, whoa, okay, I get it now. Everything now is so saturated. But when you go back and you look at something from 30 years ago, 40, 50 years ago, and you look at something created today from the same brands, probably the same studios,
Yep.
you're going to see a shift in how content is created. And it's not in the best interest of the child. It's in the best interest of the studio or the creator, the producer, the organization that's, ultimately needs to continue to finance more
The
of the same,
business, yeah.
the business, right.
Absolutely, yeah. And I suppose it sets the children they're watching this on constant fight or flight mode where, everything is happening at the same time. And that's how they move then and they transition into the real world. And I can
Yeah,
imagine them even watching this in the morning, getting dressed to go to school, and then just being wired going to school. And then they have to sit down on a chair for 6 hours. And
yeah,
how do you do that? And then, you have to give them Medicaid. I'm not going to get into that, but how is
absolutely.
that fair?
No, and that's what ends up happening, right? They get diagnosed and then they get medicated, and then there's still the main, or one of the main problems still is a constant. So the TV doesn't go away, or the harmful content doesn't go away. And again, I don't want to villainize TVs or phones or those things, because I
No.
do feel there are great opportunities, learning opportunities, shared experiences for children, even 6-month-olds, as long as they're done responsibly and, from informed points of view.
Yeah, my kids are watching TV right now because I told them not to come in here, so they're watching TV just, as
There are, and as they get older, there are great programs where they can learn and they can be curious, and the production techniques aren't as impactful as they are when when their brain development is firing, when the neurons are being created. 80% of brain development happens in the first 3 years. That's when you understand that, that's shocking, because we generally tend to treat infants, babies, young toddlers as, it's okay. They're not learning yet. They're not in school. They're not, what we do doesn't matter as much as it does once they become kids, once they get into preschool or kindergarten. And that's not the truth. The bulk of the wiring and the learning happens in those early years, the earliest years. Kids are resilient and they continue to learn and they continue to evolve, and you can correct, bad patterns that were formed early. But those early years are so formative and so important, and we don't put enough attention. And one thing I found, which also shocked me when we talk about all the shocking things that happen in here, when I started to look for support and try to get the message out there about the early years and screen design, what I found parents understood the best was I call it harmful ingredients because parents understand food. That seems to be generally more understood and talked about, right? You know, the bad fillers, the sugars, how that affects the brain, the body, the health. So I call the production techniques harmful ingredients, right? We talk about good production techniques and harmful production techniques and start to identify them so parents can immediately start to see this show is being produced in a way that's designed to capture attention, not designed for better development. But those early years matter so much. And what I found was there is very little support from organizations, financial support to get materials created, to get programs out there to change the content. Because I believe parents have the most power in the whole scenario, right? And if parents have options and they're educated on the options, they will choose the better thing. I don't feel like they will just put their child in front of a program that they know is being designed to capture attention, and that's the main feature. If they had better options, I believe they would choose those better options. But what ends up happening is in order to create better options, that has to be funded from something that is not competing against businesses that are competing for attention because that equates to advertising and dollars. But it is I've yet to find it. I've self-financed all of our research. I've self-financed all of our solutions that we're working on, all of our guidelines, because getting support in this age group is so difficult. There's very few organizations that fund the early years. It all starts preschool, especially K through 12, because there is a measurable return. There is more research. You are seeing that the research isn't happening as it should be in those early years. So that's one thing I want to put out there and share
Yeah.
because people say, well, why aren't there good options? Why? Because it's a business and you have to take that business aspect out of creating content for those earlier, for any years really, but especially the early years.
Do you think that's changing, or it's going to be people as parents become more aware of it, the
But
media will
that's why I
start
said,
changing as well?
yeah, the parents have the ultimate power. When parents change and have options and they change their behaviors, businesses have to change their patterns to keep up. What's happening right now is everything is getting overstimulating. The chaos, the that you're seeing that more and more because that's the competition for attention. And that's where kids are becoming addicted earlier. Parents don't have the awareness or the opportunities to find those shows. It took me a year, years of research to understand what the better content was. And then the content I found wasn't designed for kids. It was designed for adults, but it just so happened that the way it was produced was beneficial to a child. This is part of the awareness. That's why I'm so appreciative for you for letting me share these messages, letting that get out there. But yes, parents have the ability to change this by supporting content that is created for that age group, developmentally enriching, developmentally appropriate, or harm reduction standpoint.
Yeah, and that brings a lot of hope as well because, when we regain that, and I think sometimes we have to go to the extreme before we realize how bad it is, and then we come back. And I think we've gone from not using technology at all, but just happening so quickly. And now everything is done with like AI and technology, and everything is, oh, let's use this. This is amazing. And
Right.
ChatGPT, and everybody's on ChatGPT all day. And now, like, oh, my brain is shrinking. Now I stopped using ChatGPT. So I think we sometimes have to go to that extreme first and then we can come back. So I really I think what you think, as bad as it is, I think it brings a bit of hope that as the more aware we become, then the companies will have to follow. So then sharing this information is really powerful, really, because that's what's going to bring the change.
Yes. And look, a lot of the marketing reframing of this in that example you shared on Instagram with Cinderella and a new show, what I'm hearing a lot of parents saying now is the answer is go back to 30 years ago. Go back to that
Mhm.
programming. That's what I'm going to show my kid. That
Black
was
and white.
not developmentally appropriate either, especially for a child under 2. But you see how these systems are designed to Disney still makes the money off the old programming, right? So for them, it's like, great. The attention is on our platform. It's on our IP, our brand. Hey, we're okay with that. That's fine. And we don't have to spend more money to produce new content if parents are going to go back to old stuff. But the truth is that is still not, it's better, but it's still not developmentally appropriate. We need to create the proper content based on strict guidelines, on the production techniques, on the actions that are happening. And for me, it's very simple. We need to mirror what children are doing at that age group. I call it reality TV for infants, toddlers, babies, because that's slow paced nature, that pro social, that learning and showing what they can actually replicate at that age group. It's hard to beat that in terms of content. So if you're going to create content, it's easy content to create. It's not that difficult unless you're getting into animation, things like that, which we've put a lot of work into, because getting a child to recognize another child and have them play, in a way that's developmentally enriching is difficult. So a lot of this has to be animated in order to achieve those results. But there are also things like parents, caregivers seeing it, seeing them, talk to them, like a FaceTime, something like that, where it's slowed, it's repetitive, this autoplay of just go, 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 go. Children at that age can watch the same episode or the same content
And
a
they love
hundred
that.
times. And they do love it because now it becomes predictable to them. And that's how the brain starts to form, right? By creating predictability. What the new content does, there's no you can't predict anything because there's no rules to the content. There's no
Yeah.
consistency. There's no through line. There's no,
Yeah. So how can we give that reassurance to parents that it just trust your instincts, trust your gut, trust you know what's best? How do we give them that reassurance and empowerment for them to make the right choices?
that's a great question. I think, it's, wow, such a great question. I don't have an answer to that. I mean, really for us, it was education, right? Get some information. As a parent, you should be able to discern some of, okay, this checks out, this aligns. I could see when this happens, how my child reacts. I'm being attuned to the child ultimately, even no matter what the programming is. Even if somebody says it's the best developmentally enriching educational programming for your child, you have to look at how your child's reacting to that, right? Not just take a marketing claim and take a parenting view that through a parenting lens. And that's how you'll start to understand what's good, what's bad, but also know what are the harmful ingredients. So you can start to identify them. And once you see it, like I said, once you see it, you can't unsee it. And I'm working on showing some more of that. I do some of that in my upcoming TEDx talk, where I talk about the differences and how to identify these and, really how to differentiate between this polarizing conversation where parents are to blame, or studios are to blame, or this individual is to blame for all the problems. And this is safe because it's public media or it's this, but ultimately, a lot of that is all business related. Even nonprofit organizations have to fundraise to keep their mission alive. And so we're seeing a lot of nonprofits being compromised in the process and aligning with studios or platforms that are not adhering to developmentally appropriate guidelines. So it's difficult being a parent. It's hard. Just be kind to yourself, be attuned to your children, and I think good things will happen. And that's the answer.
The power of observation, you mentioned it twice just now on how children react to what they're watching, and that really gives you a specific individual reassurance that they're watching something that's okay or that's not okay. But also you mentioned earlier, if your child really likes cars. So it's again back to that observation. When you observe them playing, you get so much information, and then you can top up that play or that interest with a little program, watching together
Yeah.
15-20 minutes of something related to what they're interested in together, and have a conversation, or on their own if you have to do something else. You don't have to be with them all the time. But I think that that balance is really healthy, and that's where you are working on bringing that as a balance with play and
Yes.
screens, and it can compensate each other.
Yeah, I mean, I call it a bridge. It's a developmental bridge, a educational bridge, and it's not just a one-way bridge for the child. It's also for the parent because parents,
Mm.
can learn and benefit from experiencing something on a screen that's developmentally appropriate, there's a lot of good that could come from that. One thing we focus on the early years is helping parents learn the language of the child. It's always, trying to teach the child your language immediately, but it's so important to learn their language and to help them communicate. And that's through symbolic gestures in the early years, understanding vocalizations and certain vocal patterns, body language, facial expressions, emotions. The more you're attuned to that, the communication becomes easier, and it's easier for a parent and the child to have dialogue without using language or spoken language. So, and one other point, just in the attunement, what I've heard a lot of is, with shows like Cocomelon and things like that, you'll hear parents say, my kid loves it. They just sit in front of it and they're learning so much. They're just glued to the screen. They don't even take their eyes
Great.
off of it. And to a parent, that looks like, oh, wow, look how engaged they are. They wouldn't watch these other shows, but this one they really love. They're really into it. Unfortunately, most of the time, what's happening is it's so overstimulating that they're not able to process what's happening at all, or they're just able to process a tiny bit, but the constant fight or flight reaction is happening where they're not able to process, not able to understand. And instead, they're in that fight mode, which appears like, oh, I'm engaged. I'm so into what's happening, but the brain is just, again, I hate to go back to the addiction patterns, but when you see someone who is on a drug, it looks like they are
Loving
focused or
life.
yeah, exactly. They're loving it. But what's happening in the brain, in the body, physically and mentally is not, um,
Yeah, that's incredibly powerful though. The fact that turning that my child loves this too, this is what's actually happening. And that's really hard for parents to know. Why should I know this? When I see my child looking and paying so much attention to this, and I know they don't pay attention to anything else, but when they're here, they can be here for hours. I'm going to think they love that. So it's good for them because they're also learning vocabulary and songs and communication when they're actually. And I think the problem as well is that they're missing out while they're glued to the screen. They're missing out on all these, I fall, I get back up, and building all the skills,
right.
resilience, creativity, being bored, all the skills that they need in life. It's just not being developed. So it's not just the time on the screen, it's the time taken away from real experiences.
Yes.
And that's a
Well,
real problem.
that's the screen time debate, which largely that's been the core debate, is the screen time and how much time.
Mm.
I think now it's shifting more toward what's on the screen plus the time, and you'll find when children aren't being overstimulated, they don't want to sit in front of a screen that often. I think a lot of that is the programming of what's happening with the dopamine spikes and that imbalance that keeps them connected. But I think when you find developmentally appropriate content, you'll find that the kid then takes that and wants to get up and play and explore. Again, becomes that bridge to get them from a moment of sitting down, maybe, they're dysregulated from something else that's happening in their environment, need a little bit of break, or the parent does, and then using that to say, "Okay, I'm ready now. I'm good," as opposed to what currently happens where it just agitates them, dysregulates them even more, which becomes a bigger parenting issue to deal with, and that creates a lot more friction and a lot more, "Oh, I need a break," this, that, we've all been there as parents, and it doesn't support parenting as it should. It gives you time, but that time is at a cost.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Exactly like you said, it's something that when they're watching it, you can nearly see how it sparks their curiosity and it sparks an idea. Oh, I'm going to do this now. And obviously, 0 to 2 year olds might not have the
Right.
vocabulary or the ideas to go and do something, but that curiosity, regulation. So these are the signs we need to look for when they're watching something, that it calms them, and then they've had enough. And if not, then
Absolutely.
bad sign.
And we're seeing it in children, under 1 year old, where they are seeing something on the screen that is produced in a way that's not designed to capture attention, and then they're replicating it or trying to mirror that to a caregiver or parent. So there are abilities. There's a lot of research out there about the transfer deficit and the children. A young child can't get anything from a screen. There's no, but if, any parent who's had their child in front of a screen very early ages will tell you, no, they can, they are able to process what's happening, and they are parroting. Whether it's developmentally clicking or not is one question, but there's the trans deficit of being able to see a screen and action that's on it and be able to replicate that's been disproven.
Yeah, and also for the brain, correct me if I'm wrong, but for what I've read, the brain doesn't know what's real and what's not. So whatever they're
Right.
watching, that links back to appropriate content.
Right.
The brain doesn't know that what they're watching is real or it's not. So it's going to trigger real emotions
Right.
and chemicals in the body, isn't it? That's going to trigger one thing or another depending on what they're watching. And that's
Right. And
real.
this carries on through their life, right? In the school age years, when scary content plays, they're afraid. You tell them monsters aren't real, but that's a hard thing for them to comprehend. How is it not real? I saw what happened on screen. That's going to happen to me. So yeah, it is extremely important. And those things do affect them, and they aren't able to separate fact from fiction in that regard.
Yeah. So if there was one thing, anyone listening, one action they could start doing, one new habit to change, one new action to take from right now, that's going to have the biggest impact in the years to come for their children, what would that be?
I would say, choose better content, right? Try to analyze the content that you're playing, look at it. And I know it's hard because now there's hours and hours. You can't look at everything. You don't know what they're saying, doing, portraying. But in general, you'll know the patterns of shows. You'll know, is it just constant audio and video chaos? Is there a lot of effects popping up everywhere? Because the other thing is the characters remain calm, and then everything around them is just chaos, and that affects the ability for a child to comprehend or process. Look for those engagement tactics, those harmful ingredients, multiple points of interest where you don't know where to focus, or you're going everywhere and you're not comprehending anything. And, watch out for the autoplays where they just constantly, the compilations where they say, now we've put, 2 hours of Bluey together. So you don't have to keep clicking. You just let them go for 2 hours. Those things are all designed to keep a child connected, to keep them engaged, to keep them hooked. And if we could start there, I think that's a good starting point. And then as parents, be kind to yourself, be kind to your child. They are probably acting out because of what they're watching, right? It's not because they want to watch it. It's because of what happened when they watched it. So those are the parts we have to look at and be compassionate about and be respectful of, and start to see how that is affecting their relationship with screen and friends and parents and
Yeah.
that whole process. So that's what I would say is start there, and then support better content, better media, better creators, because if you're going to give a certain platform or distributor money to watch content, that can be as impactful. Your impact can be much greater by supporting someone who has specific guidelines to help create better content where they don't have to go outside and look for special interest money.
Yeah, absolutely. And be confident in that, in those boundaries that you're setting with your children
Yes.
as well, because at the end of the day, you have your child and their safety at heart. So just be confident that if they cry, they want to do these. Oh, my friends watch these, my friends watch that.
Yeah.
But I am the person that looks after you, and I'm the person that provides a safety for you. And these are the boundaries that we're setting in this house. So just have that confidence. I think it's really important. Parents, sometimes if we're unsure, like, oh, okay, fine. I want to be a good parent, but just be confident that at the end of the day, it's your child's safety that's
Yeah.
at stake here.
I love that. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We'll put all the links on where to find you, because absolutely, as you said, investing in our children is investing in people who care for our children. Even if you don't know my children, the content and the research that you're creating, it really benefits all of our children and the future generations. So we'll put all the links here and where to find you, your content, your research, because I think, and I know the more we know as parents, the more informed decisions we will make for our children. And as you said, if we have options, we will choose the best ones. So you're giving us a lot of really good options. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.